Hi, it's Ted Asregadoo for Truthout TV. My guest is Mike Lofgren, who worked as a congressional staffer. He served 16 years as a professional staff member on the Republican side of both the House and Senate budget committees. Hello, Mike. Welcome to Truthout TV.
Good to be here.
Hey, I'd like to talk about this article that you wrote on Truthout called "America's Three-Tiered Justice System." And we like to think that there is political equality in the United States, that no one is above the law. But the reality is different, as you point out in this article. So let's talk about one of the examples that you point out at these three tiers of justice. The first, you talk about banks and regulations, because this is your first example of political inequality. So maybe you could expand on that.
Well, I think in all countries we see this sort of thing. The United States isn't super bad in this, although it certainly is far below its promise of equal justice under law. We tend to have a bit of a mythology about it. All the America, it's wonderful. Let's say rah rah for America, love it or leave it. These are the very people who don't understand we're incarcerating more people than anyone else on earth. It's just not the big bankers who are getting incarcerated. Well, there's either an extraordinary percentage, far greater than the rest of the world, percentage of bad people in America, which they would never concede because of American exceptionalism, or the justice system has something fundamentally wrong with it.
Yeah, you talk about the Attorney General and his sort of money quote about sometimes these entities are too big to prosecute.
Well, that's exactly right, and I'm amazed that nobody took him to task for that, and that I don't see what's wrong with prosecuting the CEO or the whoever it was who perpetrated the crime. That's a very discreet prosecution and shouldn't affect a bank, which is, after all, a corporation generally, which is separate from the officers who run it. So I think under those circumstances, that's better than levying a fine or some huge penalty that's simply going to be paid by the shareholders, the people who have nothing to do with it.
You said that the fine versus the profits of the bank was it was very small in comparison to how much profit that the banks had made within a year.
Right. It was a very small percentage, less than 10% of what HSBC made in a year. And I find ironic that what was the thing that HSBC was doing? It was money laundering. It was money laundering for drug kingpins. Now, it's the so-called war on drugs, that failed program that's been going on for 40 years now, that puts so many people in prison for extremely long stretches, and they have their entire assets confiscated. So it really shows in a quite vivid way that there's one law for the rich and one for the rest of it, in precisely the aspect of what was HSBC charged with. It was charged with a drug crime.
And you also point out that even during confirmation hearings, when a nominee is put forth to regulate essentially the financial industry, as long as they sort of pass a benchmark or a threshold that is okay with the confirmation committee of the Senate, who has to confirm these nominees. Really what it is they're looking for people who are going to turn a blind eye to regulation.
Well, one can only conclude that Elizabeth Warren didn't make it when she was up for the Consumer Protection Agency that was going to regulate the financial services industry. Richard Cordray, the next in line for that job, has been waiting forever because the presumption is they're actually going to do their job.
Imagine that.
Mary Jo White sailed through as chairman of the Securities and Exchange Commission. I'm not an expert on her career, but certainly some disturbing questions have been raised about her activities in the private sector, defending the people that she's supposed to be going after as SEC commissioner.
Let's dovetail a little bit into something that affects many people, and that is one of these, a smartphone. Most carriers underwrite the cost of a smartphone for their customers. So, for example, I use an iPhone, and I got it at a discount because my carrier decided to underwrite it, and they make their money off their 2-year contract that I pay every month. Now, there's a new law that has come out that says that if I unlock my phone, which makes it open to any carrier that I want, even though that I've paid for the phone and I'm out of contract with my carrier, that is now illegal to do so and punishable by up to $500,000 in fines. Seems ridiculous.
Well, it is. And first, I must interject that I'm by no means an expert on technology issues. It's probably fortunate and lucky for me that I even get the Skype to work today. But what I do know is that money talks and follow the money is the prime rule when you're dealing with Congress. Now, I worked a lot with Armed Services Committee issues and defense appropriation issues for most of my career. And I thought that those committee members were pretty well juiced with contributions from the military-industrial complex. I didn't know anything about that until I saw how the telecom industry really juices the members. The 1996 Telecom Bill, which is sort of the originator of a lot of these laws that only gradually phased in, was a real case in point, and it was a real eye-opener to me because so much money just flowed into the coffers of people's campaigns, and as a result, we got provisions, and in later laws dealing with telecommunications and also copyright, that basically invalidate the first sale doctrine that says if I buy some object in a legitimate sale, it's mine. I can modify it or do whatever I wish with it that is within any other applicable law. It's not something that that the seller retains some sort of right of possession over, but not in this case. And you notice too that the penalties are draconian.
Yeah, $500,000. I don't have that kind of money.
Well, nobody does that's in our situation, but this is the kind of draconian deterrent that the tech industry is able to impose on people to get its way.
I think you mentioned in your piece that an unlocked phone can sell at a higher price. So if I technically own my phone, which apparently I don't anymore, even though I paid for it, and I want to unlock it and resell it at a higher value, it does fetch a higher value on the open market. And so in a way that the phone companies are trying, the carriers are trying to protect that sort of resell and protect their markets that way.
Right. They want to destroy any resale value so that they can sell themselves rather than have a big resale market, as there is a resale market for late model used cars.
Exactly. And you talked about something earlier about the correlation between a lobbying group or an industry, the politicians that get the money, and the laws that sort of come out on the other end. The correlation between campaign donations, the prison industry, and elected officials, and of course, the laws that are passed for sentencings of crimes. This is something that you touch on your piece as another tier within the justice system that is an example of political inequality that you've seen up close, certainly. Just
as in the foreign affairs realm, if Kellogg, Brown and Root, Halliburton pays a lot of money into campaigns, it's going to get juicy logistics contracts for our overseas misadventures. If Corrections Corporation of America pays a lot of money to state legislators, they're going to get privatized prisons that allow them to extract a rent from the taxpayers from now till kingdom come. And it's in a category where I think you could say that this is a core function of government. People can argue about certain other things, whether government should do it. But I think when the justice system condemns a person to a period of years of incarceration, that should be controlled by the government for a lot of reasons.
I think in political science, they call that the iron triangle, the connection between the lobbyists and the politicians and the apparatus of state power. So this is certainly something that hasn't gone away, and it doesn't seem like it's going to go away because it's business as usual in Washington, D.C., unfortunately, at times. The third tier of that you talk about in your article is the untouchables, and you specifically talk about the Obama administration's policy on drone strikes. And this is something that you argue that there is no law to constrain the government, mostly because the whatever law or policy or executive order that was put together was sort of cobbled together and is essentially a sham. So can you explain this?
Well, I don't have any sort of personal knowledge or insight into these things other than reasoning by analogy to the way I've seen things go on in government. They tend to do these things in a very ad hoc way. And as you saw the train of events, people like John Brennan making statements that, oh, we're very constrained in this. We will only do this in the case that somebody is planning an imminent attack. Well, after the fact, they leaked this document, which supposedly is not their real legal documents, but a summary thereof, to say that imminent means not necessarily imminent. It could be no particular attack is indicated. It's simply the sort of biographical signature of the person they're targeting indicates that he's an Al-Qaeda senior leader, and thereby, by definition, he is to be attacked. So that's a rather shaky law on a rather ad hoc basis, and it shouldn't surprise us. Did the Geneva Convention, which we signed, and all the anti-torture statutes that we supposedly have on our books in the United States Code, did they constrain us from Abu Ghraib? No. Do we abide by the Helsinki Final Act that upholds the sovereignty of nations and inveighs against force and aggression in foreign affairs? No, we've ignored that. We ignore the landmine statute. We never even bothered to sign that. We do not recognize the International Criminal Court. So it's pretty much the Wild West. So why should drones be constrained by any formal law that would restrain their use?
Well, I think you make some very powerful connections, and within your article, it's a really provocative piece. I encourage all Truthout readers to not only read it, but to share it with their social networks and get the truth out, as it were. Mike, I want to thank you very much for being on Truthout TV.
I enjoyed being here.
Mike Lofgren, as I said, is my guest. You can read his article on Truthout. I'm Ted Asregadoo. Thanks for joining me on Truthout TV. We'll see you next time.